Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling one of those huge questions, maybe the question, who or what is God?
It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah,
Echoes through all of history, all cultures.
absolutely. It shapes so much. And to help us navigate this, we're looking at John Bowker's God, a very short introduction.
Right. And our mission today really is to unpack the sheer diversity of how people have thought about God.
Not finding the answer then.
No, not at all. It's more about seeing how that understanding is, well, constantly changing and provisional, as Bowker puts it.
Always evolving.
Exactly. We want to pull out the key ideas, maybe some surprising facts from this really complex subject.
Yeah, and I think what we'll find is just how non-uniform the whole concept of God is. You know, you might be surprised, for instance, about early cults imagining deity as a goddess.
A mother source, yeah.
Right. And ultimately, the idea is that God is far beyond all human words, certainly beyond gender.
Way beyond.
But these understandings, they change, they evolve, a bit like scientific understanding, maybe.
That's a good analogy. And to get the present, you really have to look at the past, the formative foundations.
Okay. So, God, it's the word people reach for when they talk about the ultimate and absolute reality.
That's the core idea, yeah.
So let's kick things off with that basic challenge. How do philosophers, theologians, how do they even start trying to define God? It seems huge.
Oh, it's a monumental task.
Yeah.
They've always aimed for, careful and precise language, trying to pin down what God would have to be.
For God to be God.
Exactly. For God to be truly God. And historically, some fascinating definitions pop up, like that than which nothing greater can be thought of.
And some, right. The idea that the perfect concept must exist.
Precisely. Or that more poetic one, a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere.
Suggesting boundlessness.
Right. But then you hit a snag. When we use human terms, God as mother, God as king.
Are we limiting God? Anthropomorphizing?
That's the question. Are these metaphors adequate? Richard Swinburne tried a more provisional definition.
What did he propose?
Something like, God is necessarily and eternally a person essentially bodiless, omnipresent, creator and sustainer. Perfectly free, omnipotent, omniscient, perfectly good, and a source of moral obligation. Quite a list.
That is quite a list. Okay, and here's something that really bends my mind. The concept of God's existence.
Ah, yes.
It's not like asking if this table exists. God, as the unproduced producer of all that is.
Can't be just another object in the universe.
Right. So in a way, saying God exists is almost wrong or misleading.
It's different. God doesn't exist like contingent things that depend on other things for their existence, like us or the table.
So God doesn't get existence from somewhere else.
No. God simply is, eternally.
Yeah.
Existence is part of the definition, you could say. To be God is to exist in that fundamental way.
Okay, that's a critical point. And it must affect how we even talk about God.
Absolutely. It shapes the language. We can't speak univocally.
Meaning, literally.
Yeah.
Like God has hands like I do.
Exactly. That reduces God. But we also can't speak equivocally where the words mean something totally different because then, well, we couldn't say anything meaningful at all.
So what's left?
Analogy. We speak of God by analogy.
Okay, analogy. Give me an example. How did that work?
Well, take omnipotence. God is all-powerful.
Right.
Doesn't mean God can do the logically impossible, like make a square circle. That's just nonsense.
Okay.
It means God can do everything that is logically possible. It's an analogy to our concept of power, but amplified infinitely within logic's bounds.
And omniscience. All-knowing.
Similar idea.
AF.
Knowing everything that is knowable, which interestingly, in a post-quantum world, might mean some genuinely free future choices aren't, strictly speaking, available to be known beforehand.
Even by God.
Even by God. If freedom is truly real and some outcomes are genuinely open, it's about the kind of knowing God has.
That's a subtle but important distinction. But this whole analogical approach, speaking carefully about God, doesn't it risk death by 1,000 qualifications?
That's the critique, yes. You qualify God so much what's left. It's what initially led thinkers like Antony Flew towards atheism.
And then someone like Dietrich Bonhoeffer from a very different place talked about abandoning a false conception of God.
Right, in a world come of age, moving beyond the God of the gaps. God is just an explanation for things science hasn't figured out yet.
So what's the alternative?
Bonhoeffer saw God as the beyond in the midst of life.
Yeah.
Immanent, present within everything.
Immanent. Okay. How has that idea played out?
In fascinating ways. You have Spinoza's duus of natural God. God is nature. That's pantheism.
God and nature are one and the same.
Yes. Then there's process theology, Whitehead and others, seeing God within the universe, evolving with it. That's panentheism, God in everything, but also more than everything.
Then entheism. Got it.
Even early animism, spirits in nature, could be seen as a sort of primal immanence.
And Paul Tillich, you mentioned him earlier.
Yes, Tillich offered a powerful definition. God as the infinite and inexhaustible depth and ground of all being.
That resonates. Depth and ground. Okay, so with all that philosophical weight, what about the more sort of classic arguments for God's existence? The logical ones.
The traditional proofs. They're often described now as abductive inferences.
Meaning, like Sherlock Holmes, inference to the best explanation.
Kind of, yeah. Or retroductive inferences. They're not mathematical proofs, but arguments for what's most likely to account for what we observe and experience.
Okay.
The cosmological argument. Yeah, the universe seems to need a first cause. The teleological. The universe looks designed, so maybe there's a designer.
So watchmaker argument.
That kind of thing.
Right.
And the ontological argument, the most abstract one, basically says God's definition as perfect implies existence.
Right. And didn't Swinburne add more?
He did. Arguments from consciousness, morality, providence, history, miracles, and, importantly, religious experience itself.
And Antony Flew, the philosopher you mentioned, who leaned atheist, he actually changed his mind later on.
He did. It's quite a famous shift. He eventually concluded that the evidence, the laws of nature, life's complexity, the universe's existence, pointed strongly towards an intelligence.
An intelligence that could explain itself in the world.
Exactly. It connects to the anthropic principle in physics, too. This observation that the universe is incredibly fine-tuned for life. Almost. Suspiciously so.
Like it was meant for us.
That's the implication some draw. For Flew, ultimately the best explanation became whatever is the cause of there being a universe is what we call God.
Wow. Okay, so we've got philosophical definitions, arguments for existence, but let's dig deeper. Why does belief in God persist so strongly? It's obviously more than just filling gaps in scientific knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a God of the gaps. That idea fades as science advances. The belief runs much deeper.
Historically, it served different purposes, right? Consolation.
Yes, providing comfort, but also that's used politically. Polybius in Rome, the legalists in China, they saw rulers using religion or ideas about divine order to control the people.
Right.
But the key thing is understanding changes. Just like science, our ideas about God aren't static. They're corrigible and incomplete.
So how do the behavioral sciences try to explain this persistent belief?
Well, there are functional explanations. Marx saw religion as a tool of oppression, a weapon for vested interests. Freud saw it as an illusion, maybe helpful for some he termed psychopathologically disabled.
Pretty critical views.
Very. But then you have structural explanations, looking at the brain itself. Julian Jaynes' bicameral mind theory, for example.
The idea that one part of the brain used to speak as God to the other.
Kind of, yeah, in ancient consciousness. Or more broadly, biogenetic structuralism, which suggests our brains might actually be prepared, almost wired, for the recognition of God.
Wired for God. That's a fascinating thought, which leads us straight to direct experience. For many people, that's the core evidence.
Absolutely. We're talking about experiences of an unforgettable kind, sometimes called absolute unitary being or AUB.
What's that like?
Descriptions often involve the self-dissolving, the universe dissolving into just, perfect, timeless, undifferentiated consciousness. Pure awareness.
Wow. But not everyone interprets that as God, right? Didn't Bertrand Russell have experiences like that but remain atheist?
He did. Interpretation varies. But for many, these are undeniable encounters with the divine. Rudolf Otto called it the numinous.
The numinous.
Yeah, that distinctive experience of God. It feels transcendent, totally other, yet also stirs this deep recognition this is the source of beauty, of love.
And this kind of awareness isn't rare.
Apparently not. It seems widespread.
Yeah.
And it leads people to feel God is active, in the world, in their lives. They interact through prayer, through worship.
So it's less a static belief, more an ongoing relationship, process.
I think so. John Henry Newman argued that belief develops. It has to change to remain the same, to stay true to the underlying reality as understanding grows.
So resistance to change is actually a problem.
It can be. It leads to rigid ideas that then get rightly criticized, sometimes fiercely, by people like Richard Dawkins, for example.
Okay. So from these broad ideas, philosophical, experiential, let's transition. Let's dive into some major traditions, starting with the Abrahamic faiths.
Right. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all trace back to Abraham.
Common ancestor, but different paths diverge from there, especially concerning God.
Significantly. So Judaism. The understanding is grounded in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible.
Torah, prophets, writings.
Exactly. It tells the story of the Bene Jacob, the Israelites, believing God called them for a specific work and responsibilities.
And their encounter in Canaan.
Crucial. They encountered in Canaanite beliefs, absorbed things like the name El, which became another name for God, for Yahweh, YHWH. But the foundational event is the Exodus.
Moses, Egypt, the Red Sea.
Yes. Guided by this newly revealed YHWH. That leads to the covenant of the Ten Commandments at Sinai. Later, prophets like Elijah fought against Baal worship, insisting YHWH was the only God.
And then came the monarchy, David the temple.
Right. David unites the tribes, establishes Jerusalem, the first temple, and the idea of the king as Hamashiach, the anointed one, the Messiah, emerges.
As a mediator of God's blessing.
Initially, yes. But when the kings often failed, well, that hope shifted towards a future ideal Messiah.
How did they grapple with suffering, especially undeserved suffering?
That was a huge theological development. The simple idea suffering equals sin got challenged. Think of Job or the suffering servant in Isaiah 53. It forced deeper reflection.
Leading ultimately to
the absolute core of Judaism, God's radical oneness, Yehud Hashem, summed up in the Shema. Hear, O Israel, YHWH our God, YHWH one.
One. Not multiple gods, not divisible.
Undivided, unique, incomparable. Maimonides really clarified that later. And Jews, bound by this covenant, are called to live in holiness, to do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God.
A powerful, evolving tradition. Okay, so how does Christianity build on or diverge from this?
Well, Christianity starts as a Jewish movement, an interpretation of that covenant. Jesus comes along, making it, in his followers' eyes, livable for everyone.
How so?
By focusing intensely on love, love for God, love for neighbor as the core. The kingdom of God, he taught, was open through faith and love, not just strict adherence to the law.
And his actions, healings, forgiveness.
His followers saw the dunamis, the power and effect of God in him. It led them to believe they'd literally met God in Galilee.
But then the crucifixion, that seems like a failure.
From one perspective. But his followers became utterly convinced he was alive after death. That conviction changed everything. They declared him the Christ, the Messiah.
And the New Testament documents this belief.
It's a stubborn historical fact, as Bowker says, attesting to that transformative belief. They called Jesus Lord, Son of God. They believed God had been in their midst.
God in Jesus.
Yes, the self-expression of God, the Word of God made flesh. Now, the Jewish understanding of God's oneness, that remained fundamental.
But it had to expand somehow.
Exactly. It led to huge theological questions. First, Christology. How could Jesus be both fully God and fully human? That leads to the doctrine of the incarnation.
God becoming human.
Then, atonement. How did his death fix the broken relationship between humanity and God? How did it defeat sin and death?
And there were different ways of explaining that.
Many metaphors. Sacrifice, redemption, like buying back a slave, paying a penalty, or Christus, victor Christ, conquering evil forces.
Okay, incarnation, atonement, and the third big one?
The Trinity. How are the Creator, Father, the Redeemer, Son, Jesus, and the active presence, Holy Spirit, all one God?
Reconciling oneness with this threefold experience.
Precisely. The doctrine of the Trinity affirms God's oneness as triune relatedness, a community of love within God. The economic Trinity, how God acts towards us, points to the immanent Trinity, God's inner relational nature.
Wow. That's a really profound development from the strict oneness of Judaism. Okay, let's shift gears again. Islam. How does it approach God?
Islam proclaims God's absolute sovereign majesty. It sees itself in continuity with earlier prophets, but Muhammad is the final messenger.
And the name for God, Allah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Allah comes from the Arabic Al-Ilah, the one who is God. It stresses that absolute oneness, Tawheed. That is the absolute bedrock, the primary impulse of Islam.
Tawheed, oneness.
Muslims believe Islam began with God's eternal purpose for humanity, to live by din, which covers all aspects of life. Muhammad received the Quran,
which is seen as the final, perfect revelation.
The uncorrupted, complete, and final revelation. It's considered uncreated, the literal speech of God.
Uncreated, like it existed eternally with God.
That's a major theological view, yes.
Yeah.
There's also the concept of abrogation, naskh, where later verses can supersede earlier ones due to changing needs, but it's still seen as God's act.
And how are descriptions of God in the Quran handled? Like God having a throne?
Big debates early on, literal or metaphorical. The dominant view from figures like Ibn Hanbal became bila kaif, without asking how. accept the attributes God reveals about himself, without trying to pin them down with human logic or analogy, in the same way Christianity might. Embrace the mystery.
Okay. And the path for Muslims.
The Sharia Islamic law, based on Quran and Hadith, saying sections of Muhammad, guides Muslims to live constantly aware of God through dhikr, remembrance of God.
What about free will versus determinism?
And a deep discussion. The concept of qadrat holds that God determines all things, but it's reconciled with human responsibility through kasb or iktisab. Humans acquire their actions, making them responsible.
Interesting balance. And how does Islam view Jews and Christians?
They are called al-Kitab, people of the book.
Acknowledging they received revelations.
Yes, but Muslims believe those earlier revelations became corrupted over time. So there's a shared history, leading sometimes to cooperation, sometimes historically to conflict.
And the Christian idea of father and son.
Absolutely impossible within Tawhid. The Quran is explicit. He does not beget, he is not begotten. That language is seen as compromising God's absolute oneness.
Which leads to the concept of shirk.
Yes, the unforgivable sin in Islam, associating anything with God, giving partners to God. That includes idolatry, but also applying concepts like son, literally, to the divine.
Such a strong emphasis on absolute oneness.
Yeah.
Okay, let's pivot dramatically now. India.
A whole different universe of thought, in many ways.
And we should be careful not to just say Hinduism, right? It's more like a family of traditions.
Exactly. A large family with many different members is a good way to put it. Incredibly diverse.
But are there common threads running through?
Oh, yes. Often you find the idea of Atman, the eternal, immortal self within each person.
This soul.
Kind of, but often understood as non-different from Brahman.
Brahman being.
The ultimate reality, the source and substance of the universe. So Atman is Brahman, fundamentally.
Wow. Okay, what else?
The cycle of samsara, birth, death, rebirth. Governed by karma, the law of cause and effect. Actions have consequences, shaping future lives.
And the goal is to get out of this cycle.
Yes, the goal is moksha, liberation, release from samsara. And dharma duty, ethics, appropriate behavior, provides the map for making progress towards moksha.
How do people connect with the divine or work towards moksha?
There are traditionally three main paths: the trimarga, karma marga, the path of action, ritual, fulfilling your dharma,
Okay.
Nana marga, the path of knowledge, wisdom, insight into the nature of reality, realizing Atman is Brahman,
And the third?
back to marga, the path of loving devotion to God. This became hugely important.
Devotion. So how is God encountered?
Encounter is key. God manifests in countless forms, often through murtas.
Images, statues.
Embodiments, perhaps is a better word. Worship, puja, often involves darshan.
Darshan.
It means seeing, but it's reciprocal, seeing the divine in the murte and being seen by the divine. It's a moment of direct contact.
But these aren't idols in the sense of worshiping the statue itself.
No, that's a common misunderstanding. They are means to the end, pointers towards the reality beyond the form. They help focus devotion and facilitate that encounter.
What about the scriptures, the Vedas?
The Vedas are incredibly ancient, considered Shruti, heard or revealed, pre-existent, discerned by ancient sages, the rishis. They describe devas.
Gods, like the Greek gods.
Heavenly beings, finding ones is a better translation. They aren't necessarily God in the singular ultimate sense, but more like different epiphanies of the primordial origin. They bring cosmic order.
Epiphanies, like different facets of the one.
Exactly. They are expressions of that which is. Names and forms might change, be absorbed or replaced as understanding deepens, but they point to the same underlying reality.
You mentioned the pizza effect. How does that apply here?
Ah, yes. It's Bowker's analogy for how ideas spread and adapt. Just like pizza changed from its Naples origin, characterizations of God spread, interacted, evolved, producing the major deities we know, like Vishnu and Shiva.
Okay, tell us about Vishnu.
Vaishnavites worship Vishnu as the supreme lord, Ishvara. He's both transcendent, beyond the world, and immanent, dwelling within as Antaryaman, the inner guide.
And he appears in the world.
Yes, as avatars, descents, most famously Rama and Krishna. They embody divine virtues, demonstrate devotion, and help restore Dharma.
And Shiva?
Shiva is fascinating. He absorbed aspects of the older Vedic god Rudra. He's worshipped as both terrifying and auspicious, the god of destruction and creation.
The cosmic dancer Nataraja.
That's him. Lord of the dance, trampling ignorance, surrounded by fire. His power, his Shakti, is often embodied in his consorts, like Parvati or Kali. They are the energy that makes him active.
And the goddess herself, is she worshipped as supreme?
Oh, absolutely. For many, Mahadevi, the great goddess, is the ultimate reality. the singular source and origin of all being.
So a kind of feminine monotheism.
Bowker calls it monotheism, yes.
Yeah.
She is Shakti, the fundamental energy and power of the universe. All other gods, male gods included, derive their power from her. Tantra, as a practice, often focuses on activating this divine feminine energy within.
It's incredible, this acceptance of so many forms, so many paths.
That's a hallmark. Diverse epiphanies are seen as valid ways to the same ultimate goal, because underlying it all is the conviction there is only one who is God, however that one is approached or named.
But there were philosophical debates about this one, right? Shankara versus Ramanuja?
Huge debates. Shankara, with Advaita Vedanta, non-dualism, argued reality is only Brahman, Nirguna Brahman, without qualities. The world we see is Maya, illusion, or creative power, which makes Brahman appear as Saguna Brahman, with qualities.
So ultimately, only Brahman is real.
In Shankara's view, yes, Ramanuja disagreed. His Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-dualism, insisted that the world and individual souls are real, distinct attributes of Brahman. Loving devotion, bhakti, and relationship with a personal god, like Vishnu, are essential to Brahman's nature.
So for Ramanuja, the diversity isn't illusion, it's part of God's reality.
Yes, it's seen as God's Leela, God's play, God's exuberant delight in creating multiplicity, many paths, one goal.
Amazing variety. Okay, as we start to wrap this up, let's circle back to something fundamental you touched on earlier. God being invisible, unknowable in a direct sense.
Right. God isn't an object among other objects for us to observe directly.
But people still feel God is known, or, as you said, abductively inferred. How?
Through the effects, the consequences on earth, as Bowker puts it. These are like the clothes that make God real to our sight.
The clothes of God, what are they?
He groups them into three main categories. First, creation.
The universe itself.
Yes, it's beauty, order, reliability, vastness. These are seen as signs, ayat in Arabic, pointing beyond themselves, revealing fundamental values, truth, beauty, goodness. Nature is a kind of text of revelation.
Okay, creation. What's the second?
Inspiration and cooperation.
Yeah.
God is discerned in human creativity, in our interactive enterprise.
Like arts, sciences.
Arts, sciences, technology, acts of care, building communities. It suggests a collaboration between the human and the divine. And of course, revelation itself, sacred texts, fits here too, as an enduring, inspired way of knowing God, even as interpretations change.
Collaboration with the divine, I like that. And the third type of effect?
Manifestation in human form. This is where beliefs like the Christian incarnation or Hindu avatars come in.
God actually appearing as human.
Yes. The belief that God takes initiative, enters the world in a tangible way to meet humanity's need for rescue, repair, guidance. It allows for direct relationship, complete disclosure, and love.
Because we know God through these effects, these clothes, but this brings us back to that idea of unknowability too, doesn't it? The via negativa.
Exactly. Apodic theology. While cataphatic theology makes positive statements about God based on those effects.
Apophatic says what God is not.
Or rather, stresses that God is ultimately beyond description. Words fail, concepts fail, using terms like ineffable or phrases like Allahu Akbar, God is greater, or Deo semper mea, God is always greater.
They signify that any positive statement is just an approximation.
Yes, it always falls short. But this isn't meant negatively, this darkness, this cloud of unknowing. It's not emptiness.
What is it then?
It's seen as an affirmation that God is infinitely beyond our concepts, a constant invitation drawing us deeper, especially into love. The more we let go of our own fixed ideas, the deeper the potential connection.
So the unknowing invites relationship.
Precisely. The experience of profound love for God, even when God feels absent or incomprehensible intellectually, can lead to this blissful embrace of loving immersion.
It goes beyond just thinking about God.
And that journey is unending.
Unending. And for many, it starts very simply, with prayer.
So we've covered a huge amount of ground, from philosophy to experience, Abrahamic faiths to Indian traditions.
It's clear that God is the word for that ultimate reality, but how humans characterize it is incredibly diverse, constantly shifting. Yeah, this deep dive really showed how people have grappled with that concept through logic, science, direct experience, revelation, always searching for meaning, for connection to that ultimate reality.
And despite all the differences, even the contradictions, you see that persistent thread, don't you? That search for the ultimate and absolute reality, often finding its deepest expression in love, in relationship.
So a final thought for everyone listening. If this journey of knowing God is unending, and maybe begins simply, What does it mean for your own understanding of that beyond in the midst of life? And how might that understanding continue to evolve for you?